What is up, fight nerds and dirty gamblers? I am Erik, and this is Erik Bets Fights. How's it going, y'all? It's fight week again. It's always fight week lately. Not that you'll hear me complain about that. We're on like I think a 7-week run of UFC cards straight. Yeah, I love it. It is nice to get a break once in a while once you get into the content creation thing. But man, I will gladly watch UFC fights every Saturday. So yeah, we're gonna be rolling into UFC Vegas 54 this upcoming Saturday. What is it, Wednesday today? So yeah, about 3 days away. We'll be headlined by Blachowicz versus Aleksandar Rakic. So this video is going to be my full card breakdown for that card. But first, we need to recap my bets for UFC 274. You know, we just came out of a huge card, a card that looked really great on paper, lots of name value there. Not that there weren't some exciting fights, there were, but it was also kind of ended up being a little bit of a weird card. That Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza fight, one of the worst fights we've ever seen. I don't agree that it's the worst fight in UFC history, because I think the worst fight in UFC history was the rematch between Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn at UFC 9, I'm going to say? I can't remember for sure, but I would say that one was even worse. But anyway, yeah, that was a stinker of a fight. Yeah, I'm not going to recap the whole card. I'm just going to recap the bets that I had for that card real quickly, and then we will move into breaking down UFC Vegas 54. It was a small winning event for me here. I picked up 0.18 units, but let's just go ahead and go through those bets. First of all, I had 1 unit on Carla Esparza at plus 190. You know, I thought there was definitely value there. You know, Carla, obviously a solid wrestler. Rose, we've seen Rose be taken down and held down. Not a lot, but I mean, we know it can happen. Obviously, that's how their first fight went. That was a long time ago, so I didn't want to read into that too much. But I did think there was solid value on Carla at plus 190. The fight didn't play out the way I thought it would, but we did pick up the 1.9 units there, so that was nice. I put 2 units on Andre Fialho over Cameron Van Camp. I got that at minus 324. One thing I always like to think about when I go through these recaps is just kind of, you know, what did we learn? What can I take away from this going forward? And one spot where I really struggle, you know, people say scared money don't make money, and I find that I'm scared money a little more often than I'd like to be. That was a spot where I should have gone deeper. You know, I probably should have gone 4 units on that or something rather than just 2. So yeah, that's one thing I'm working on in my betting process is, you know, picking out the spots where I feel really confident and trying to get comfortable with putting a little more on those so we can get a little bit of a better return. Next up, I put 1 unit on Ariane Carnelossi at plus 170. You know, the silver lining there is now I can officially point to what I feel is the worst bet I've ever made. Just a terrible bet. I mean, she got absolutely smoked. You could almost argue that every single one of those rounds was a 10-8. Ariane Carnelossi got smoked in that fight. The mistake that I made really was kind of putting something into my handicapping there that was something that I hadn't actually seen. I was kind of guessing, and you never want to do that, and I make that mistake sometimes. Like, I looked at that fight and thought, okay, well, Carnelossi doesn't have, she's been taken down. She had, I think, 25% takedown defense going into that fight. She had been taken down 3 times on 4 attempts, all in the Na Liang fight. But I thought, you know, this is something that her team will have worked on her with. Her takedown defense is going to be better. I also thought in that fight, part of the reason she was taken down so easily is because that fight was really chaotic. And so they were, you know, kind of off balance and out of position a lot. And I also thought, like, okay, you know, Lupi's going to mostly be looking for these tie-up, clinch, like trip takedowns, and that's going to be hard for her to do against someone as physical and strong as Carnelossi. I was wrong about all of those things. Lupi absolutely smoked Carnelossi, and yeah, that was a terrible, terrible bet. I definitely am pretty good about admitting when I have made a mistake, and that was a terrible mistake, so enough about that one. Then next up, moving on to my props and parlays, I did parlay Chandler and Royval got plus 1, or no, it shows plus 196 on the screen here. That's incorrect. That was a 3-leg parlay, but the other leg was, I think, was the Cerrone Lozon fight to not go the distance. So it wasn't actually plus 196. That just shows from when that other one was still on there. But we did hit that one. I put 1.5 units on Chandler Ferguson to go over 1.5 rounds. You know, I was trusting Ferguson's durability there. And, you know, who could have guessed that Ferguson was going to be subject to a kick where durability just didn't come into play. I don't think there's a human being alive that could take that kick and not be out cold. So yeah, a little bit of bad luck there maybe, but yeah, what a gruesome finish. That was wild to see. Next up, I should have known better on this one. I put 1.55 units on Blagoy Ivanov and Marcos Rogerio de Lima not to go the distance. I got that at minus 155. I saw it as like, okay, Rogerio de Lima is going to come out like a bat out of hell looking for the early finish. So either he's going to find the early KO or he's going to gas himself out and Blagoy is going to take over and sub him in like round 2 or 3. That isn't really the way the fight went at all. Rogerio de Lima really didn't gas out. I mean, he slowed down certainly, but yeah, I was reading a little bit too much into things that were not reality in that one a little bit, so that one did not go our way. And next up, this is another spot. Like I said with the Andre Fialho, that I should have gone deeper on that. I said on every Saturday I do a show on DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel called Best Bet, where it starts an hour before the first prelim of the UFC card kicks off, and we go through all of our favorite bets. And I said on that on the show on Saturday, right before the fight started, I said I think Macy Chiasson by decision might be the best value bet on this card. I got it at plus 330. At that point, before the fight started, it was at plus 380. And, I heard there were a lot of people who were betting Dumont. A lot of people were parlaying Dumont. I heard a lot of people who were really confident in Dumont to win this fight. In fact, I saw somebody in the chat during that live show, somebody was like, Dumont all day. And I just didn't get it. In my mind, I was like, this fight is going to play out really closely. I think these two are pretty evenly matched. I thought it was going to be, kind of a dirty, clinchy fight with a lot of clinching, a lot of cage pushing and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how it played out. And so in my mind, I was like, this is a fight that is almost certainly going to go to decision, and it's going to be close. How are you not going to take the value at plus 330? Or like I said, it even got up to plus 380. Like, to me, it was a no-brainer to take the value on that. And then that did come through for us. But the mistake that I made there is I decided, you know what, I'm only going to put enough on this to win 1 unit if it hits. So I ended up putting 0.31 units at plus 330. That's a spot, if it's a spot where I feel good saying, you know what, this is the best bet on the card, I got to go bigger on a spot like that. That was a mistake on my part. Like, I just was like, oh, it's still kind of a low percentage outcome. Like, I'm not going to go heavy on it. But yeah, in retrospect, I should have. Like, if I'm willing to say this is the best bet on the card, I got to be willing to put out at least a unit on that, So moving forward, I'll try to fix that a little bit too. This next spot, I bet 1 unit on the Oliveira Gaethje fight does not start round 4. A lot of people were on the under 2.5 there. I was a little scared. See, this was another scared money don't make money thing. Like, I was like, I could do doesn't start round 3, but I wanted to be really safe. I was like, man, I feel very, very sure that it doesn't start round 4. But again, I only put 1 unit on it. That's a spot where I should have gone heavy as well. That's a spot where, like, I felt, very confident that the fight wasn't going to go that far. Like, I probably should have put 3 or 4 units on that or something. So that's another. Yeah, I've been on a little bit of a losing streak lately too, and that hasn't helped any. That's like made me a little bit more scared to pull the trigger on some of these or go bigger on some of these bets. So, hopefully I can kind of build my confidence back up again, get on a little bit more of a win streak. I was on a win streak for a long time. If you look at my graph on betmma.tips, it was going up like this, and then we're on a little bit of a downturn, but hopefully we can get going back up again. Anyway, and then finally was just a little tiny prop sprinkle. I put 0.1 unit on Ferguson wins by sub in round 3 at plus 2,500. Obviously, we didn't get there, but my read on that fight was Chandler's going to come out hot. He's going to be throwing everything full power. If Ferguson does survive those early rounds, we may get to a round 3 where Chandler is tired out, he's gassed, he's slow, he just doesn't have it anymore, and Ferguson is beat up, he's got blood streaming down his face, but Ferguson, he's a maniac. I was like, he's going to smile with blood in between his teeth, and he's going to be like, let's do this. And I thought, maybe we'll see Ferguson get a sub there, but obviously we didn't get to that point. But like I said, it was a small win, 0.18 units at 2% ROI, so not great, but, as they say, I'll take it. However, to look at our overall, we're still doing pretty well. We're sitting at 52.82 units of profit since I started tracking in October 2021, and that's at 16% ROI. I don't know the exact amount that we're at this year. We ended last year at about 42 units, so we're sitting right around 10 units on the year, which, we're almost halfway through the year. I would love it if we were doing better than that, but hey, at least we're in the green. Anyway, enough about that. Let's go ahead and move into the breakdown for UFC Vegas 54. So it's only an 11 fight card here, which is, it's a bummer come fight day, but for content creators and bettors who are doing the tape study, it was a nice break. I got done with my tape study much earlier this week. I'm not entirely positive that I've got the right bout order here. I pulled this off of Tapology. Sometimes this changes, but I'm going to start at the bottom of the card and work up with the bout order that was on Tapology at the time that I took these notes. So hopefully they'll be right. First off, we've got Nick Maximov versus Andre Petroski. What are we looking at for odds there? Maximov is a big favorite, minus 365. He's even up at like minus 400 or worse than that in spots. Andre Petroski can be had for plus 310. I'm just going to say right off the bat that I think the lines are wide there. I can understand why Maximov is favored, but I don't think he should be that big of a favorite personally. I did take a shot on Petroski here. I put half a unit on Petroski's money line. I think I got him at plus 350. At the end of the video here, I'll pull up a graphic of the bets that I have for this card, and we'll go through them all, but I'll kind of try to throw them out there as I go. But so Nick Maximov, he's 8-0 overall. He's 3-0 in the UFC if you count his Contender Series appearance. All three of those are by decision. Petroski is 3-1 in the UFC if you count The Ultimate Fighter. He's got 2 submission wins, 1 ground and pound win, and then 1 submission loss to Brian Battle on the Tough Show. One thing that I really like about Nick Maximov, so I can see why he's favored here, and I do favor him to win. This is one thing I talk about a lot in my breakdowns. Nick Maximov is a fighter who has this trifecta of traits that I really like to see, especially in grappling heavy fighters. So Nick Maximov, trait number 1, he has the skill and the technique. So he is an excellent wrestler technically. He knows how to perform takedowns well. He knows how to get his opponents down. He has good top pressure. He understands how to control opponents and that sort of thing. So he's got the skill and the technique. That's number 1. However, how often do we see fighters who have the skill and the technique? They're good wrestlers, but they just don't use their wrestling. That's the other thing. Number 2 is he has the tenacity and the desire to use his wrestling. He understands that that's where his strength lies. I don't know why so many fighters don't, fighters who are great wrestlers and aren't particularly great strikers, and they'll come out and have a kickboxing match. You're not going to see Nick Maximov do that. Maybe he'll get to that point someday, but right now he understands what he's good at and he pushes it. So he's got the skill and the technique. He's got the tenacity and the desire to be like, you know what? I'm going to push my wrestling because that's what I'm good at. And then the most important piece of that trifecta, number 3, is he has the cardio to continue to push the wrestling like that. I think that's a big part of the reason why a lot of fighters who are good wrestlers don't end up wrestling, is because they know that working for takedowns tires you out more than almost anything else that you're going to do in an MMA cage. And fighters who don't have the cardio to make that work, they understand that. And that's why you'll see fighters sometimes do the thing where they shoot for a takedown with like 30 or 40 seconds left in the round, because they know that they don't have the cardio to push it consistently. And they also know that winning the end of the round is the most important thing. It's not supposed to be. What you do in the end of the round is not supposed to be weighed more heavily by the judges, but realistically it is. You can lose 4 minutes and 15 seconds of a fight, and if you get a takedown and land some ground and pound, you can steal that round. It shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. So Maximov has those 3 traits, making him, he is a fighter that I like to bet on. A fighter who is a good wrestler, has the desire to wrestle, has the cardio to wrestle, and is just gonna and will just tenaciously look to chain together takedowns and that kind of thing. I love to see that, and he does have those things. The narrative on Andre Petroski is that he's a known gasser. I think it's a little bit overstated. He does gas. He does slow down, but he doesn't really like death gas. He's not one of those guys who by the time he gets to round 3, he's completely worthless. He does slow down. He does gas. He does start breathing heavy with his mouth open, but he still fights pretty effectively at that point, I think. He is a good wrestler and grappler. Maximov might be a little bit better of a wrestler and grappler, but Petroski is a good wrestler and grappler. And also, I think Petroski has a physicality and strength edge here. Maximov is, one of those guys who's not necessarily a fantastic athlete. Petroski might not be a fantastic athlete either, but he's a bricked up solid kind of guy. Not that you can always tell how strong a fighter is by looking at them, but if you put these two side by side, I'm confident guessing that Petroski is the stronger, more physical fighter here. So and one thing that I see when I kind of play this fight out in my head, one thing that I keep seeing is like, okay, so Petroski, like I said, I think he's the more powerful guy. I think he's the better striker, or at least the more powerful striker. He's a guy who's going to go hard looking for strikes. And one thing that kind of keeps playing out in my head here is the possibility of Maximov looking for a takedown and Petroski finding a situation where he can land some of those Travis Brown elbows or maybe some hammer fists or something. So I could see a situation where Maximov is holding Petroski against the cage, is changing levels, is on his hips, is looking for a takedown, and Petroski's got the kind of power where he might be able to just blast him and hurt him in a situation like that. And you know, if Petroski is able to, if they're in a scramble and Petroski is able to get on top, or even if Petroski is able to get a takedown himself early in the fight when he's still fresh and he's still strong, could he find a ground and pound stoppage? I think maybe. I do think the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Maximov, though, because Maximov maybe doesn't have the greatest cardio, but he seems to have pretty solid cardio from what we've seen, and Petroski does slow down, I think, more than Maximov does. So by way of a pick, I probably would lean Maximov here, but as far as a bet, I like either Andre Petroski's money line or even looking at Andre Petroski inside the distance, because I think if Petroski wins, I think it's going to be a finish. I have a hard time seeing him win a decision here. Next up, we've got Tatsuro Taira versus Carlos Candelario. Excuse me. The betting line here, Taira favored at minus 240 with the comeback on Candelario at plus 210. This fight was already booked once before, and Candelario had to pull out, I think, the day of the fight. I don't remember what the situation was exactly, if he got sick or something. I can't remember. But they rebooked it. I didn't do the tape on this fight again. I watched a little bit more tape on Taira today just to kind of remind. Actually, I watched a little bit of tape on both of them today just to remind myself, but I didn't run all the tape again, so my memory might not be fantastic on the details here, but I can see why Tatsuro Taira is favored here. The kids, I'm just gonna read through a few stats that I typed out here. 7 of Taira's 10 pro wins are first round finishes, with 5 of them being submissions and 2 being ground and pound stoppages. Candelario has 5 finishes in his 8 pro wins, with 4 in the first round, 2 of those by KO and 2 by sub. Candelario's level of competition has been pretty low. 6-0 and 5-4 are the best records that he's beaten. Excuse me. By comparison, Tatsuro Taira, he's fought some pretty low-level competition too, but he's beaten fighters that were 13-14, 24-13, 38-18, and 12-5. So some of those, I mean, obviously like 13-14, that's not a good record win-loss wise, but what I'm saying is these are fighters who at least have a lot of experience behind them. And like 12-5, 38-18, those are decent records. And one really interesting thing about Taira, I think he's only 22 years old. He took his first amateur fight when he was only 16 or about 16, and he managed a 9-0 amateur record by the time he was 18. So the kid's got a lot of fights already. He was born in the 21st century. I think he's only 21 or 22 years old, and already had a 9-0 amateur record by the time he was 18. And there are questions about his level of competition. He tends to get a lot of first round subs, and his wrestling looks really good. But that brings up the questions of like, okay, he's fighting in a regional scene in Asia. Like, what level of fighters? I mean, especially wrestling wise, what level of fighters is he facing there? I never want to buy like too heavily into this kind of narrative, but there's definitely something to the narrative that like when fighters come from Asia or Europe or Australia or kind of wherever, and they come to America and fight American fighters, wrestling has been a part of our culture for a long time. We have really strong wrestling programs here. Other countries are starting to catch up, but for a long time, our MMA fighters just tended to be better wrestlers. And Taira has looked like a good wrestler against the competition that he's faced in Japan. How is he going to look against solid wrestlers in America? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to that or not, but it's certainly something to consider. But Taira, his stand-up looks okay. It's not where he's the most comfortable, clearly, but he doesn't look like a fish out of water there. But his, like I said about Maximov, he will tenaciously work for takedowns. He'll shoot, and if that first shot is stuffed, he'll change angles and go to something else. He'll chain takedown attempts together until he finds something. and he's an excellent back take artist. He's very good at getting himself into an advantageous position early in the fight and finding a submission. He floats well from position to position. He has really nice suffocating top pressure. Like, his grappling looks really, really good, especially for a younger kid. Carlos Candelario, he's pretty well-rounded. He gets a little bit loose and a little bit wild, whereas Taira does tend to keep it a little bit tighter. Candelario he's a technical, skilled fighter. I'm not saying that he's, just like a wild brawler or anything, but he's just his style. He tends to get a little bit wild and a little bit loose and kind of end up in a lot of scrambles and that sort of thing. One thing that we don't really know, or at least in the tape that I was able to watch, we don't really know how how Tatsuro Taira's offensive wrestling looks, and it looks quite good. But we don't really know what his defensive wrestling looks like. Or like I said, if there's a fight out there that shows it, I haven't seen it yet. I didn't watch like every fight he's ever had, obviously, but I watched 3 or 4 of them or something, and I didn't really see any defensive wrestling, nor did I see him fighting off of his back at all. So if Candelario does prove to be the better wrestler here and he's able to take Taira down and hold him down, we don't really know what that's going to look like. So that's definitely one concern. Again, here, I don't want to buy too much into this narrative, but I do think the UFC is in the business of building Asian stars right now. I mean, they've been trying to do that for a while. They have certain markets where they're trying to build their brand, and they like to create stars in those markets. They've got a very promising, talented, exciting, marketable 22-year-old kid. I think they might be looking to get him a win here. I don't want to buy into the narrative too much, but I think they might be trying to give Taira a beatable opponent here. Not that doesn't backfire sometimes, but yeah, I do like Tatsuro Taira to win here. What did I say the odds were at again? Yeah, he's minus 240 with Candelario plus 210. I did bet Tatsuro Taira straight up a while ago, maybe like a week ago. I think I got him at minus 210. Part of the reason that I do like him to win here, but part of the reason I made that bet is because based on what the odds looked like last time this fight was booked, I thought the odds were going to get wider and wider here. Like, I thought, like, oh, if I can take Taira at minus 210 now, I was attempting to create an arbitrage situation because I thought Candelario was going to end up being a huge favorite, and I was going to be able to bet him at like plus 300 or something and just create, automatic profit for myself. That didn't happen. I got Taira at minus 210. Candelario was up to plus 220 on William Hill at one point, so I did have an arbitrage opportunity there, but it's just such a small opportunity that I didn't take it. If Candelario gets up to like plus 250 or something, I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, I might arb out and just go for it there. But yeah, if at this point with what the lines look like right now, I mean, you could maybe use Taira as a parlay piece, but I would maybe even look to Candelario, maybe look at Candelario by decision, because like I said, we don't know what Taira's defensive wrestling is going to look like or what he's going to look like off his back. So I don't mind a shot on Candelario, even though I do think Taira probably will be the winner here. Next fight up, we've got Vina Jandiroba versus Angela Hill. Let's pull up the odds for this one. Jandiroba favored at minus 170, Angela Hill at plus 155. I did bet Jandiroba here. I think I got her at minus 155. We'll take a look at that at the end here and make sure I'm getting these numbers. I got her at either minus 155 or minus 145, I think. Vina Jandiroba, she's 3-3 in the UFC with 2 wins by sub, and all 3 of her losses are by decision. Jandiroba has 13 career wins by sub. Hill does have 78% takedown defense and only 16% control time against her, which is really impressive. When Jandiroba wins, I mean, not just in the UFC, but looking at her career overall, when she wins, it's by sub like 2/3 of the time, or even a little more than 2/3 of the time, I think. Angela Hill has been subbed twice in the UFC, once by Randa Marcos in 2019 and once by Rose Namajunas in 2015. Obviously, those were quite a while ago, but it's also been quite a while since she's fought an aggressive grappler who's going to be, actively looking for submissions. And Jandiroba doesn't always fight that way. She has, developed not a super technical striking game, but a serviceable striking game. She pretty much just uses the jab and the overhand to kind of to make space, but she hits hard, and her striking is serviceable anyway. I would hope that she's not going to try to all right, I'm going to try to win a 15-minute striking battle with Angela Hill. I doubt that's what she's going to do. I think she's going to look to grapple here. One concern with Virna Jandiroba that's always there is she's never won a third round in the UFC. She does gas out. So if we do see them get to the third round, there's a good chance that Angela Hill's going to be piecing her up on the feet at that point, because Hill's going to be quicker. She's going to be the better striker. She's going to be the fresher fighter at that point. However, I do kind of lean toward Jandiroba potentially being able to find a submission early in the fight here. Like I said, if we get to round 3, she's probably going to be gassed out, but she's got 10 minutes before that to be grappling with Hill and looking for a sub. I think there's a pretty good chance that she finds that sub. And even if she doesn't, I think there's a pretty good chance that she wins those first 2 rounds. And even with the striking exchanges, how often do we see fights happen where well, we just saw it with a great example would be the Rob Font versus Chito Vera fight. Rob Font outlanded Chito Vera. I think he like doubled him on strikes landed, but Vera landed the more damaging strikes that had more, a better effect as far as like the visuals, like the opticals. It just looked better to the judges. I think we could see that kind of thing with how it plays out on the feet here too, is that Angela Hill is going to be the better striker. She's going to be throwing the straighter, crispier, snappier strikes, probably landing more of them. But if Jandiroba is occasionally landing those big overhands and stuff and stumbling Hill back and potentially knocking her down, Jandiroba could be winning minutes even though she's not landing as many strikes and is not the better striker just by landing the harder strikes. So I do like Virna Jandiroba here. I mean, would Angela Hill striking her way to a decision here surprise me? Absolutely not. But I do like Virna Jandiroba potentially to find a sub here, or potentially even to win a decision. Probably a split decision. That's got split decision written all over it if we get there. But as far as a bet on this fight, I don't mind looking at Virna Jandiroba by sub. I should have thrown the line here on my notes. I didn't. But yeah, I don't mind looking at Virna Jandiroba by sub or... Well, what was her money line? Her money line's at like minus 180, was it? Where are you? Minus 170? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd still bet her at that point, because I do think this could be a close fight. But all right, next fight we've got Michael Johnson versus Alan Patrick. Betting odds on this one, Michael Johnson is favored at minus 148, Alan Patrick at plus 130. This is a fight that I actually feel like the odds should be wider than that. Let me just give you some stats here. Johnson is 15-13 in the UFC, but he's currently on a 4-fight losing streak with 1 KO loss, 1 sub loss, and 2 decision losses in that 4-fight losing streak. Alan Patrick is 5-3-1 in the UFC with 1 KO and 4 decision wins. His losses are 2 KOs and 1 decision. Patrick has had fights earlier in his career where he got lots of takedowns, but he's only managed, this is a crazy stat, he's only managed to finish 1 takedown on 14 attempts in his last 3 fights. I sort of feel like people are looking at Michael Johnson's 4-fight losing streak here and thinking he's washed. But if you watch those fights, he hasn't looked bad in those fights. He's lost them, but he hasn't looked bad. To me, he doesn't look like a fighter who's like clearly washed and is clearly going to continue losing. I think he's still fighting pretty well. Those just happened to be not matchups that he was able to win on that given night. I think Michael Johnson is the better fighter than Alan Patrick all around. And after watching the tape here, like I felt comfortable lining Michael Johnson closer to like minus 180 or even like minus 200. Like I felt like Michael Johnson is just the better fighter everywhere here. Alan Patrick, he's very athletic. He's very explosive. He throws full power into everything that he does. So he's one of those guys who's like especially dangerous early, but he does tend to slow down. We can even sometimes see him slow down late in the first round because he's just putting everything into everything. So he's certainly going to be dangerous early. But Michael Johnson is just overall skill for skill, the more solid and consistent and skilled fighter here, I think. So as long as he's able to survive, the early onslaughts that Patrick is throwing at him, I think Johnson's going to be able to take over this fight. One thing I noticed about Alan Patrick, just kind of my read on him as a fighter overall, is it's almost like when he's in there, it's almost like he's not trying to make reads on his opponent. You know how some fighters are like feinting and trying to draw out strikes and trying to see, okay, when I do this, he does this. They're trying to make a read on what their opponent does so they can figure out how they want to react to it. I feel like Alan Patrick, it's almost like he's a kid playing Street Fighter 2 that doesn't know the moves. Like he's just trying moves. He's like, I'm going to do this. No, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. It's like he's not even reading his opponent to figure out what he should do. He just kind of decides, I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to try that. And like, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to watch. It seems like he just picks a technique and throws all of his power and energy into it without really even putting any thought into whether like it's the proper technique to throw in that moment, if that makes sense. But yeah, I do like Michael Johnson to win here, probably by decision. And like I said, I think we might be getting like a little bit of a buy low spot on him here because of that 4-fight losing streak. So I bet him at, I believe it was -130. But I don't know, in my opinion, did I say he was -150 right now? -140 and -150. Yeah, I don't know. In my opinion, I would say there's probably still some value on him there at -150. I mean, like I said, I was willing to cap him at like -180 or so. It depends on if you agree with that read or not. But if you do, there's still value on him at -150, I think. All right, next fight on the docket. Viviane Araujo versus Andrea Lee. This is a fight where I do not feel like I have a super strong read. I don't really have a strong lean one way or the other here. I'm still going to kind of give you my breakdown and kind of some talking points that I found here while doing the tape, but I don't really feel like I have a strong conclusion that I've reached here. But Andrea Lee is 5-3 in the UFC, with all of those going to decision except for her submission win over Antonina Shevchenko, which I think was 2 fights ago. Araujo is 4-2 in the UFC. With all of those being decisions except for a KO win in her UFC debut over Talita Bernardo. And if you're going, who? Exactly. But they both have pretty good volume. Lee does throw a little bit more and land a little bit more, but not much. The numbers are pretty close there. They both have around 48% striking accuracy. So overall, their striking stats are pretty close. And, we always want to put a little bit of... We want to make sure, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. We want to make sure that we don't put too much weight into statistics a lot of the time. I do share statistics in my breakdowns. I do use statistics in my capping, but part of the reason I share them in my breakdowns is I just think they're interesting. I like looking at stats. That's just fun for me. But we have to be careful about weighing statistics too heavily, I think, because it has a lot to do with sample sizes. It has a lot to do with stylistic matchups. It also, we have to take into account that these stats are, it's just somebody like sitting there with a clicker keeping track of this stuff. Like, how often do you watch a fight where this fighter clearly took this fighter down but is not credited with a takedown? There's human error, human judgment happening. So yeah, we don't want to read too much into stats, but they can be helpful, especially for a fight that, after watching the tape and figuring out the stylistic matchup, if it seems like a bit of a coin flip and you can't quite make a decision, sometimes you can look to stats to sort of like be the tiebreaker a little bit there, I guess. But anyway, excuse me. Araujo has 94% takedown defense. Check this out. 94.7% actually. She's been taken down only one time in 19 attempts in the UFC. That's pretty crazy. She's also a BJJ black belt. I really think she's a pretty impressive fighter overall. The main weaknesses that I saw in her watching tape are her cardio late in the fight. She does slow down late in the fight, and she loads up on her strikes a little too much at times. And I think those two things are related. Fighters who tend to load up on their strikes too much tend to slow down later in the fight. But not only that does it create that cardio issue, but when you're loading up on your strikes too much, a lot of times you're telegraphing that strike to your opponent. And if your opponent is somebody who doesn't really load up and who has fast hands, they're able to counter. Sometimes they can even get their strike out there and land it before your strike gets there because you're tensing up and they can see the strike coming. So, a quicker fighter with good footwork and good hand speed, who's able to read those telegraphs, to read those when you're kind of tensing up to throw a punch that you're loading up on, will be able to just kind of pick you apart. So that's something that we see a lot. I do think Andrea Lee seems like a fighter who's really starting to put it together right now. Her last 2 fights, she's had really impressive performances. I think she lost a couple in a row and then she's won a couple in a row, but she's looked really good. And, you know, sometimes we'll see a fighter look good for a couple fights and then just shit the bed and have a terrible performance. You never know. But I do think she looks like she's really putting things together lately. She has fast hands. She uses lateral movement well. She comes from different angles. If you look at the Cynthia Calvillo fight, she did a really nice job of using uppercuts and knees to kind of scare Calvillo off of takedowns. It was just a really nice performance there. Araujo is a BJJ black belt. She has put together, you know, like a decent striking game, and she has some natural power, so she has been looking to use her striking lately, but she also has an excellent ground game. I already mentioned, I'm kind of going through my notes here, I already mentioned that she loads up on her strikes, and Lee is, I think, the kind of striker who has the kind of speed and snappy punches who might be able to capitalize on that. I do wonder how much wrestling and grappling we might see in this fight and how that might go. I don't feel like I have a strong read on that. Like I said, Araujo has 94.7% takedown defense and only 6% control time against her, which is really nice. So, but like I said, I don't feel like I have a strong read on how these two match up as grapplers. So I'm trying not to read too much into the stats here, but you know, if they do go to wrestling and grappling, are we potentially going to see Araujo be able to stuff takedowns and be able to dictate how that wrestling and grappling takes place? Maybe. But yeah, overall, this kind of ends up being a 50-50 fight for me. Oh, did I pull up the odds? I don't think I remembered to do that. Yeah, it's pretty close to a 50-50 fight anyway. Andrea Lee slightly favored at -112, Araujo at +105. So yeah, it's pretty much a 50-50 fight for me. It's a stay away for me. But yeah, this is one of those where when you're getting pretty close to coin flip odds like that, those fights can be tough to handicap, but if you're able to find even to do the tape and look at the stats and whatever things you take into account when handicapping, even if you're able to kind of lean 60-40 one way or the other, that can be a decent bet when it's almost like a coin flip fight like that. But I really don't. I guess I agree. You know, Andrea Lee is a slight favorite. I guess I agree with that. I guess I would maybe cap the fight like 55% Andrea Lee or something. But yeah, it's a stay away for me. I don't feel like I have a strong read here at all. So. Next fight on the docket, we've got Jake Hadley versus Alan Nascimento. I'm going to actually remember to pull up the odds for you this time. Jake Hadley's a pretty big favorite at -220. Alan Nascimento at +185. I do think this is an interesting matchup. I enjoyed watching the tape on these guys. I didn't remember who Jake Hadley was exactly, and then when I watched, I was like, oh yeah, this was the guy that missed weight and then apologized to Dana or whatever. You know what I noticed about Jake Hadley? He looks like a smaller Jeremy Horn. If you guys remember Jeremy Horn from back in the day, Jake Hadley looks a lot like Jeremy Horn to me. Anyway, I'll give you some stats to chew on here. Jake Hadley has 74% striking defense and 3.6 subs attempted per 15 minutes. However, this is one of those spots where we want to be careful how much we read into stats because I believe these stats are only from the Mitch Raposo fight on Contender Series. So we're literally just looking at one fight here, so we can't read too much into that. But Hadley is 8-0 as a pro, but he's also 7-2 as an amateur. I love looking at fighters' amateur records too to get an idea of how experienced they actually are. I mean, obviously, when you're fighting as an amateur, you're fighting lower level competition, but I don't think that we just discount those things entirely and don't take them into account. You know, so he's actually 15-2 overall as a fighter, pro and amateur, which is a fair amount of experience, especially for a 25-year-old fighter. He has 10 submission victories, including 2 Gogo Platas, which were both as an amateur, but he does have 2 Gogo Plata finishes, which is pretty cool. Like, okay, that happened when he was an amateur, so it's like, yeah, it's probably not that hard to get a Gogo Plata. It's probably not that hard to find an amateur who would struggle with defending a Gogo Plata, but the fact that he was out there getting them as an amateur is pretty impressive too, Nascimento has lots of subs on his record pre-UFC. He's got knee bars, triangles, rear naked chokes, heel hooks, arm bars, all kinds of stuff like that. All 6 of Nascimento's losses are by decision. He's never been finished. My read on this fight, so Nascimento is an excellent submission grappler, no doubt about that, but I think Hadley is the better wrestler. And, wrestling, the fighter who's the better wrestler is a lot of the time going to be able to dictate where the fight takes place. Nascimento is a guy who can be taken down, can be held down. In fact, he's a guy who a lot of the time will just accept that bottom position because he knows that he has an excellent guard. So rather than trying to get up, he will accept that position on bottom, and he will be actively looking for subs off of his back, and he does often get them because he does have an excellent, dangerous guard. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But Jake Hadley is a very good grappler himself and has good submission defense. So it's, I think that the fight could largely play out with Hadley taking Nascimento down and Nascimento working off of his back, which, if you're Hadley in that situation, you're in danger. You're in constant potential danger throughout that 15 minutes. But if that danger doesn't come, then you've won a decision, basically. If you've watched my videos before, one thing that I say a lot is like, when the basic breakdown for a fight is that one fighter's best win condition involves a consistent process, and the other fighter's best win condition involves lightning in a bottle, kind of like involves finding that one moment where they get the win, I will usually side with the fighter who has the consistent process. That's kind of like what I was talking about with Michael Johnson and Alan Patrick too. Like Alan Patrick is going to be dangerous early, but if he's not able to find that finish, I think Michael Johnson's consistent process will take over. That's sort of how I see this fight too. Let's see, what were some of the other points I wanted to bring up here? Jake Hadley, he scrambles really, really well. He floats really well from position to position on top. He has excellent top control. And this is something like that I can't really like put my finger on exactly, but there's something about Jake Hadley's game that seems really mature to me. Like I said, he's only 25 years old, but there's something about him. I think he just has really good fight IQ. There's something about his game that feels very mature and very developed beyond his years. Like I feel like he makes good decisions in the cage. Well, I forget which fight it was. I don't think it was the Raposo fight. I think it was, I can't remember for sure, but one fight that I watched of his, he got rocked on the feet and he immediately shot a takedown, like that kind of thing. I love to see that. A fighter, he got hurt and he was still able to understand, like, okay, I'm hurt. I need to make sure this guy can't hit me again. And he was able to shoot and get a takedown right after getting rocked. I love seeing stuff like that. That's a very mature reaction to that. That shows really good fight IQ. Overall, like this is kind of a show me fight for me. I need to see how these two perform against each other in this spot before I'll feel super comfortable betting on either of them. That said, I did put Jake Hadley in a parlay, but I didn't put a lot on it. But this is a fight where I think we're going to learn a lot about both of these guys. So I'm excited for this fight because this is going to give us some data to use betting them going forward. But with the data that I had so far, I didn't feel super comfortable, doing much here. Overall, I think this is a stiff test for Jake Hadley, but unless Nascimento finds a sub off his back, like I said, I do think Jake Hadley probably wins a decision here with top control. That's kind of how I see this fight playing out. But it should be a fun one, and it's going to be cool to learn more about these guys to help us out with capping them going forward. Oh, my throat's getting dry. Just one second. Next up, we've got Frank Camacho versus Manuel Torres. This one's almost a coin flip if I remember correctly. What do we got? Manuel Torres, favored at minus 123. Frank Camacho can be had as a slight underdog at plus 110. Now, before even getting into the breakdown, if you're a person who likes the Dana White Contender Series fade, this is the perfect spot for it here, because we've got the Contender Series debutante who is a slight favorite over the established UFC veteran. However, Camacho's been off for 2.5 years, something like that. He got in a car accident, if I remember correctly. Was that him? Am I mixing him up with somebody? I think Frank Camacho got in a car accident, and he has since had some surgery and some rehab and that kind of thing, and that's why he was gone for a while. Anyway, let me read. Let me give you some of these stats here. I actually might have something about the car accident in here. So Frank Camacho was only 2-5 in the UFC. That actually kind of surprised me when I looked at his stats. I was expecting it to be a little bit better than that, but he's been KO'd twice and subbed once. His wins are 1 KO and 1 split decision. Camacho does have both subs and KOs earlier in his career. He has a good ground game, but he seems to like to brawl a little bit, or at least he has tended to brawl a little bit. looked better as far as not doing that kind of recently. Well, recently, it's been a while ago, but I'll get into that a little bit more moving forward here. But also, Camacho's had a pretty tough strength of schedule in the UFC. His losses are to Li Jingliang, Drew Dober, Jeff Neal, and Beneil Dariush. So, I mean, that's kind of a tough strength of schedule there. They tried to give him a layup in Justin James his last time out. I think that was his last fight, wasn't it? But that didn't work out. That was fluky. I don't want to take anything away from Justin James, but I think if Frank Camacho and Justin James fight 10 times, that outcome probably only happens once, maybe twice, but excuse me. Yeah, Camacho hasn't fought because he was injured in a car accident in 2021. That's what it was. Manuel Torres has 8 first-round finishes in his career, largely against low-level competition. It's pretty hard to get much of a read from him on the tape that's available. Because much like Tatsuro Taira, he's fought low-level competition and he's finished most of them quickly, which is good. You don't want to see you don't want to watch tape on a fighter and find out they're fighting low-level competition and struggling to beat them. That doesn't look good when you're getting to the UFC level. So it's nice to see that he's finishing this low-level competition early, but it doesn't give you much data to work with as far as figuring out what he's capable of and what he's not capable of. So Frank Camacho, he likes to apply pressure, come forward, throw hard strikes. Like I said, he can tend to brawl a little bit, but he seems to have shored that up a little bit in more recent fights. And Camacho's one of those guys that I feel like his record doesn't necessarily reflect how good he actually is. Like I said, the Justin James knockout, I think that was a low percentage outcome. And previous to that, he got subbed quickly by Beneil Dariush, but I mean, that's not anything to feel terrible about. That's definitely something that's going to happen. But in his fight right before that, he looked excellent against Nick Hein. He was really putting it together. Really he wasn't brawling a lot in that fight. He was staying measured. He was staying disciplined. He was picking his shots. He was hurting Nick Hein. He was when he was hurting him, he wasn't cranking it up too much, and he was still staying disciplined and staying measured. Like, I just thought it was a really nice, well-rounded, disciplined approach that he had in that fight. So it's easy to look at his last couple fights and be like, okay, he got knocked out by Justin James. He got submitted by Beneil Dariush. But those were both, quick losses, which that can happen, especially, Beneil Dariush, like I said, can't feel too bad about that. The Justin James one, like I said, I don't think it would happen that way again. And previous to that, he had a very nice, impressive, well-rounded performance against a tough guy in Nick Hein. So that was 3 years ago, but even so. As far as Manuel Torres, like I said, it's hard to get a great read on him from the footage that's available, but he stands very tall. He throws nice, hard, straight punches. He has nice leg kicks. He uses a teep to the body. He has a nice left hook, overhand right, head kick. He's fast. His striking looks pretty nice, and he's a long guy. He's got a nice build for striking, and from what you can see of him, it looks pretty good. But what's he going to look like? I mean, he's taking a huge step up in competition here. What's he going to look like if the fight is extended? If I was going to bet this fight, I would maybe look at fight doesn't go the distance, because I feel like either Torres is going to find the early finish here like he's done so many times before, or he's going to find that he didn't get that early finish and he probably worked hard for it in the first round, and then he's going to find himself extended against a solid, experienced UFC vet and probably struggle, down the road later in the fight. And if that happens, I do kind of favor Camacho to be able to find a finish, later in the fight. So I do think we likely see a finish here. I don't mind taking a shot on Frank Camacho here for the reasons that I said. It's an opportunity for that Dana White Contender Series fade, and also we just don't know that much about Manuel Torres from what we're able to see, and from what we've seen in the last few performances from Camacho. I think he was really starting to put it together, and I think he's capable. He's been off a while, and he's coming back from that car accident, so there's question marks around that always make it a little bit tricky. But assuming that those things aren't going to come into play, assuming that we see the Frank Camacho that we were starting to see in his last fights, this could be an excellent matchup for him here. But yeah, again, we're making guesses, and we don't want to do that too much when we're capping fights. So this one is a stay away for me. This is sort of a show again, another show me spot where I want to see what Frank Camacho looks like now after that car accident, after being off for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it was. And I want to see more from Manuel Torres. If Manuel Torres comes out and gets that round one finish, then it's like, okay, well, we still haven't learned that much about him. We still didn't get much of a sample size, but he was able to do the same thing to an experienced UFC vet as he was doing to that lower level competition, and that does tell us something, I think. So yeah, either way, we're going to learn a little bit more about where these guys are at right now. So it is a stay away for me. I'm going to use this fight to learn a little bit more. Ooh, it's a good thing it's 11 fight cards. My throat's giving out on me already, and we still got a few fights to go. Next up, we've got Katlyn Chookagian versus Amanda Ribas. Betting odds on this fight: Chookagian favored at -175. Comeback on Amanda Ribas is +155. I did bet Chookagian here at -145, but I'll tell you why I did it. I bet her specifically because I wanted to take advantage of an arbitrage opportunity, which I ended up not doing because I do like Chookagian to win here. But there's two different books that I typically use, and when I pulled up the odds, the way that I do my research is I watch the tape not knowing what the odds are, and then I set the odds myself, and then I compare my own odds to the odds that exist to see if I find what I perceive to be value there. But after I did the tape, I pulled it up. On one of my books, Chookagian was -145, and on my other book, she was like -170 or -180 or something like that. So that told me, like, okay, well, that means I can see, or this is how I read it anyway, it was like, okay, I can see which direction this is going then, or, you know, that's what I think is happening here is I think money is coming in on Chookagian, and not as much of it has come in on my one book where she's at -145. So I was like, okay, I'm going to bet her at -145, and if it continues to move that way, I'm probably going to be able to get like plus 160, plus 170, plus 180, who knows, on Ribas. She got up as high as plus 155. She might have gotten up as high as plus 160. I can't remember. And I almost took it, but you know, an arbitrage opportunity like that, it's a very small amount. I mean, I would have been making a tiny fraction of a unit, and guaranteed profit is guaranteed profit. But I ended up deciding that I did like Chookagian here, and especially, you know, that she's at -170, -180. I got really nice closing line value there. So I think I'm just going to let that bet ride unless something crazy happens with the lines at this point. But anyway, let's talk about this fight a little bit. Katlyn Chookagian is 10-4 in the UFC, with all of those going to decision except her losses to Valentina and Jessica Andrade, you know, two of the best in the world. Chookagian has 55% takedown defense, but she's only been controlled by her opponents 14% of the time, which is pretty good. She was taken down by JoJo Wood 3 times on 4 attempts, but Chookagian still won a decision in that fight because JoJo wasn't able to keep her down for long. I specifically watched that fight because I looked at the stats and saw that she was taken down 3 times in that fight, and I was like, okay, I want to see what kinds of takedowns JoJo Wood is getting her with and how long she's keeping her down and that kind of thing. And it was largely, actually, I think all 3 of them were, it was JoJo catching a kick and tripping her were the kind of takedowns we were seeing there. Amanda Ribas is 5-1 in the UFC, with her only loss being her KO loss to Marina Rodriguez. Ribas is 47% on her takedown attempts, and she attempts just under 1.99 takedowns per 15 minutes, and she has 31.8% control time against her opponents. Now, we know Katlyn Chookagian, she's basically a distance point fighting machine. Like, if you created a robot and programmed it to be a point fighter from distance, you've got Katlyn Chookagian. She is someone that she's almost impossible to beat in that kind of fight. She's so good at winning a point fighting type of, if you allow her to strike with you from distance for 15 minutes, you're not going to win that fight. That's just, it's what she's so very good at that she's going to beat you there if you let that happen. However, Amanda Ribas, she does like to pressure forward with aggressive strikes to try to close the distance and then look for a takedown. A lot of times she does kind of clinch up, look for a body lock, kind of takedown, that sort of thing, which those kind of takedowns have been effective against Chookagian at times. However, Chookagian is really good at using her jab and her teep, like her front kick, to keep distance. So that's something that she'll probably look to do here as well. Also, you know, she has good footwork. She cuts angles. She can be tough to get a hold of. I mean, that's another way that you can kind of fend off a wrestler, is just by using lateral movement, by using your footwork, by making yourself a difficult target. Chookagian has been taken down 18 times on 40 attempts, which is, you know, okay, not great, but her opponents aren't able to keep her down for very long. And another thing I think we need to keep in mind here is that Chookagian's only losses in the UFC are Jessica Andrade, Valentina Shevchenko, Jessica Ai, and Liz Carmouche. she only loses to champions and contenders. I mean, she's only lost to people who have either held the belt or fought for the belt. So, so far anyway, you have to be a pretty high-level fighter to beat Chookagian. And, I don't know if Amanda Ribas is at that level. And again, I don't want to buy too heavily into that narrative, but, this is maybe where we'll learn if Amanda Ribas is at that level. But, I don't know if she is yet. So, if Ribas isn't able to get Chookagian down and keep her down, then we're likely going to see a Chookagian fight. We're going to see a kickboxing battle that plays out at distance, and like I said, you just can't really beat Katlyn Chookagian there. As far as a bet, if you were going to put a bet on it now, what did I say? Katlyn's she's at minus 170, minus 180 now. I don't know. At this point, if I was going to bet the money line, I would maybe even look to Ribas, because it's not that she doesn't have a path to victory here. If Ribas, tenaciously works for the takedowns, if she's able to get the takedowns, and if she has the cardio, we have seen her slow down, so that could be an issue too. But if she is able to get takedowns and keep Chookagian down for, decent spells of time, or if Chookagian is able to get up again and Ribas has the cardio and the tenacity to be able to take her down again. I mean, if we see Ribas being able to get decent amounts of time in those control positions, she absolutely could beat Chookagian here. I just lean toward thinking she probably can't, but that doesn't mean I'm right. So if I was going to bet a money line at this point, I would potentially look to bet Ribas, honestly. But one bet that I do like right now is Katlyn Chookagian by decision at minus 115. It's never any fun to bet a prop that has a minus sign in front of it, but, death taxes and Katlyn Chookagian by decision, right? Katlyn Chookagian has never, I don't think she's ever won in the UFC unless it was a decision. That's just, she wins. Doesn't she have, I think she might have the UFC record for decision wins. I'm trying to remember. She has something like 8 or 10 decision wins in a row or something. I don't know. Sometimes these stats are floating around in my head and I'm not even entirely sure that I'm right about them, but I think that she might have the most decision wins in a row. So, Katlyn Chookagian by decision, minus 115, which, like I said, you want to have plus money in front of a prop, but when her money line is at minus 175 and she's a fighter where her decision prop is basically her money line because that's how she wins every time, there's value there, I think, that potentially. So something to look at. Oh, my throat's giving out. Hey, if y'all are still here, y'all are the real ones. I've been blabbing for a long time already, and we have 3 fights left. So if you're still here, thanks for hanging out. Also, while we're talking about it, go ahead and give me a like down there. Make sure to subscribe. You might be seeing this on the Never Hedge Media channel. If you are, make sure to pop over to the Erik Betts Fights channel and give me a sub over there too. I'm creeping up on 200 subscribers. I'm still kind of new in this space. I don't have a whole lot of followers yet, but Kyle and Scott from Never Hedge were kind enough to take a shot on your boy here. So I'm still kind of new building a following, but they were like, hey, come on in, let us help you out a little. So that was nice of them. So it's really cool to be a part of this Never Hedge Media thing. Anyway, next up, we've got Louis Smolka versus Davey Grant. This is another fight where I don't know if I feel like I have a super strong read here. I guess I have a pretty strong lean. I don't know. Let's get into it. Davey Grant is 6-5 in the UFC. That's including his fights on The Ultimate Fighter. He's been in the UFC since 2013, but he's only fought 11 times. So 2013, that's 9 years. That's almost 10 years. He's only fought 11 times in almost 10 years. So that's kind of weird. Among his UFC wins, he does have several KOs and several subs, so he's shown an ability to do both. Smolka's on his second UFC run now. He went 5-5 in his first UFC stint, which was from 2014 to 2017. Then he won 3 fights on the regional scene, and he was brought back, and he's currently on a 3-3 run in his present stint, so he's 8-8 in the UFC overall, assuming that I did the math correctly there. Davey Grant is a good, his last fight, I think it was his last fight, was against Adrian Yanez, who, some people say is the best boxer in the UFC. And I thought he looked really good in that fight. He lost, but it was a close fight. Davey Grant is a solid striker, a solid boxer, a tough guy. He hits hard. He's a little bit unorthodox, a little bit awkward and tough to figure out, I think. But yeah, and he's a good striker He's not afraid to exchange in the pocket either. He'll get right in there and throw with you. He does not mind doing that. Louis Smolka is probably the better grappler here, but I think Grant is the more athletic and physical guy. And I kind of have doubts that that Smolka is going to be able to, I mean, obviously skill and technique trump strength and physicality most of the time. But I have doubts that Smolka is going to be able to control Grant if they do get to the ground. And he might even have trouble getting him to the ground in the first place because I think Grant is just going to be the more athletic and physical guy. One thing to be aware of, though, one little caveat is that 3 of Davy Grant's 6 losses are by submission. So I have seen some people saying, hey, you know, this is... Oh, I forgot to let you know the line, because the line is pretty wide here. Davy Grant minus 300, Louis Smolka plus 260. I have seen people saying, like, hey, there's value on Smolka here because of his submission upside, because Davy Grant has been subbed. And I can see that line of thinking. That said, Smolka's takedown numbers aren't that great. He's not the greatest takedown artist. He's excellent once it gets to the ground. He's not the greatest wrestler, offensive wrestler. And Grant does have pretty decent takedown defense. So I did put Grant in a parlay. He was at a slightly better number than he is now. I can't remember what number I got him at exactly. Maybe minus 280 or something. We'll take a look at that when we get to the end. So I do like Grant to win here, but you know, when we're betting, we're looking at value. Where does the value lie? Sometimes you're picking one fighter to win, but you're still betting the other fighter. This is coming from a guy who bet Mike Jackson against Dean Barry, and he won. I got him at plus 750, and he came through. You got to take those spots when they're there sometimes, right? Like, did I think Mike Jackson was going to win? Of course not. Am I going to take plus 750 on what is essentially a low-level regional fight that happens to be taking place in the UFC's octagon? If you give me plus 750 on either guy when it's a super low-level fight like that, I'm probably going to take it because there's a lot of variance there. Anyway, I don't need to go off on a rant about that. But my point being that I do like Davy Grant to win here, but you can get Louis Smolka's submission prop at plus 650. And it might even be out there at a better number than that. I use BetOnline. That's where I bet props. But BetOnline often has worse numbers. I live in Las Vegas. So since I'm in Nevada, I can't use DraftKings and FanDuel. They're not allowed here. And so that's a lot of times where the books that have these really great prop lines. So if it's plus 650 at BetOnline, it might be like plus 800 or something at FanDuel or DraftKings. I don't know, but a lot of times some of the other books do have better numbers. So I definitely don't hate a shot on Louis Smolka by sub here. I may even end up... Usually my process is, you know, once fight day rolls around, you know, sometimes maybe like Friday night, the night before the fights, or like the morning of the fights, I go back through and look at all the props, and I end up taking my little degenerate sprinkles that I probably shouldn't, but I do anyway. That Louis Smolka by sub could be one that I end up putting a little something on. So anyway, only 2 fights left, gang. Next up in the light heavyweight division, we've got Ryan Superman Spann versus Iwan the Hulk Cutelaba. Betting lines here. Cutelaba is a pretty big favorite at minus 220. Come back on Ryan Spann at plus 187. If you count Dana White's Contender Series, Spann is 6-3 in the UFC. He fought in the Contender Series twice. He lost the first time and he won the second time. He has 2 KO wins and 1 sub win. Excuse me. His losses at the UFC level, he lost by KO to Johnny Walker, lost by sub to Anthony Smith, and then on the Contender Series, he lost by stoppage due to strikes, I think it was, versus Carl Robertson. Iwan Cutelaba is 5-5-1 in the UFC with 3 KO wins and 2 decision wins. His losses are 2 by sub, 2 by KO, and 1 decision. This is kind of interesting. Spann has only had 15 takedowns attempted against him in 9 fights, so not very many takedowns being attempted against him. Cutelaba, this is a pretty impressive stat. Cutelaba attempts 4.3 takedowns per 15 minutes and gets 2.4. But here's the crazy thing about that stat. He had a lot of fights where he didn't really look to wrestle. In his last 2 fights, he has landed a total of 17 total takedowns in his last 2 fights. I think he got 9 in one and 8 in the other. So he's clearly either he's looking to focus on his wrestling more, or he simply felt that wrestling was his best path to victory in those 2 fights. I don't know why he wrestled that much, but he landed 17 takedowns total in his last 2 fights. So, you know, if we can consider that a trend, he's probably going to look to wrestle here. One thing to bear in mind in this fight is there is a huge size discrepancy. Ryan Spann is a big dude. He's going to have 4 inches of height and 6.5 inches of reach. And if Michael Bisping can be believed, when I was doing tape on one of Spann's fights, I forget which one, but Michael Bisping said on the commentary that Spann apparently cuts down from 235 on fight week. Don't know if that's true or not. That's what Bisping said. So Ryan Spann, he's a big guy. He's going to be a lot bigger than Cutelaba here. That said, Ion Cutelaba is the Hulk. The guy's crazy. The guy's a maniac. I don't think he cares how big you are. Spann has a huge size advantage here, but I don't know how much it's going to make a difference against a guy like Cutelaba, because he's not really a guy you're going to out physical. I mean, he's the Hulk for a reason, you know. Even if he's a little smaller, I think that he's going to be able to keep up physically with just about anybody. So those 17 takedowns. So yeah, Cutelaba got 8 takedowns against Devin Clark, and Devin Clark is a wrestler. I mean, that's what he's known for. He's a better offensive wrestler than defensive wrestler, clearly, but yeah, he was able to get 8 takedowns against a fellow wrestler in Devin Clark, and he got 9 takedowns against Dustin Jacoby. Jacoby's a kickboxer, but even so. So my point being, Cutelaba's in wrestling mode, and we'll probably see more of that here. One mistake that I've made in my capping lately is not weighing wrestling heavily enough. That's why I was talking about with Nick Maximov when he got that trifecta. I need to make sure I'm weighing that heavily enough in my capping. So I was looking at the lines here, and I'm like, I don't know if Cutelaba should be such a big favorite and whatever, but you know, if I'm allowing myself to weigh wrestling heavily enough in my mind, then yeah, Cutelaba probably should be that big of a favorite. And Ryan Spann can wrestle. It's not like he's a fish out of water with wrestling. But like I said, a lot of times it does come down to the tenacity and the cardio and the desire. Like, are you gonna push the wrestling? Are you gonna try to wrestle? And Cutelaba has shown us in his last 2 fights that he probably will. And if he's going to, even though Ryan Spann can wrestle, Ryan Spann can defend takedowns. If you're gonna work tenaciously for those takedowns, if you're gonna be takedown minded, and you're like, you know what, he stuffed this one, I'm gonna try again, or I'm gonna chain my attempts together. You know, usually you're going to eventually get that takedown. So I feel like that's how Cutelaba is probably going to approach this fight. Let's see. Cutelaba does tend to get finished in losses, and Ryan Spann has found finishes in a bunch of his wins. So if you're interested in betting the dog here, I would probably take the extra juice on Spann inside the distance, because I feel like if Spann's going to win, it's probably going to be a stoppage. But yeah, that's, you know, if I was gonna pick a best bet, that might be it, because with the money line the way it is, I do think Cutelaba is the rightful favorite here. But with him at like minus 220, you know, I wouldn't bet that straight up. Would I put it in a parlay? Maybe, but you know, it's not like Spann doesn't have a path to victory here, so I would maybe just stay away from it. But if you're looking for a fun prop sprinkle, maybe that Ryan Spann inside the distance at plus 300. But this should be a fun fight. Just 2 big physical guys who are going to get in there and get after it. I'm excited to see how this one plays out. Which brings us, folks, to the main event of the evening. In the light heavyweight division, Jan Blachowicz versus Aleksandar Rakic. That's right. Best Fight Odds this isn't listed in the right spot. I couldn't find it, so I just wrote it down. Jan Blachowicz is the underdog at plus 170. Aleksandar Rakic at minus 190. Jan Blachowicz is 11-6 in the UFC. He's best known as a power striker with a limited but, you know, functional ground game. Rakic is 6-1 in the UFC, with his lone loss being to Volkan Oezdemir by split decision. The striking output numbers, if we look at the stats, the striking output numbers and the striking defense numbers for these two are pretty similar. Rakic has landed only 25% of the takedowns he has attempted in the UFC, but he has defended 90% of the takedowns attempted against him, which is really impressive. He's only been taken down 2 times on 20 attempts. But this is a situation where, it's always important to, like I said, you don't want to weigh stats too heavily, and you always want to look at the sample size and even look at the details of the sample size. Like, okay, this is an example of what I mean. Rakic has been taken down 2 times on 20 attempts, but Rakic's UFC debut, which was against Francimar Barroso, Barroso landed 2 takedowns on 14 attempts in that fight, and it was Rakic's UFC debut, so you know he probably had nerves. He's probably improved since then, etc. So he's been taken down twice on 20 attempts, but both of those successful takedowns and 14 of those 20 attempts were in his UFC debut. So he has faced only 6 total takedown attempts in the 6 fights since then, and none of them were successful. So that's why it's important to really look into the stats and kind of see what's going on there. So does that mean that Rakic truly has that level of takedown defense, like 90% level? Maybe not. He might, but I don't think that stat tells us a whole lot because of the details of it when we dig into it. Jan Blachowicz doesn't typically look to wrestle much, but he does have 3 UFC fights in which he's landed 3 or 4 takedowns. So he's shown that he will wrestle when he feels it's in his best interest. And he's not, he's not a guy who's going to win a medal in the Olympics or anything, but he can wrestle. He's got a functional wrestling game. Jan Blachowicz is a guy who he throws very hard, but he doesn't load up. His strikes come like pretty quick and loose, but still have a lot of power on them, which I love to see fighters. And that's partially technique, I think, but I think that's also partially something that you're kind of born with. Some fighters really have to load up in order to get power in their shots, and Jan is able to just kind of throw them out there, and they still have a lot of power on them, which is nice. Blachowicz, he can be inactive at times. Sort of his striking style, he doesn't throw consistently. Excuse me, he's not one of those guys who's keeping strikes out there all the time. Rather, it's almost like he just rests and hangs out until he finds his spot, and then he comes forward all at once with a lot of times like a 3 or 4 or maybe even a 5-punch combo, and then a lot of times he'll punctuate it with a body kick or a head kick. So he's not like keeping his jab in your face or anything necessarily. He's waiting for his spot, and then he comes forward with a bunch of big shots all at once, and oftentimes he does catch people with those. He's also a guy, and like I said, he'll tack a head kick or a body kick on at the end of the combo, which I like to see that. He does like to try to draw strikes out of his opponent so he can counter. He'll try to use feints to draw out strikes. When he finished Dominic Reyes, interestingly, it was because they started brawling. I mean, they created a brawling situation, and basically Jan just got the best of the brawling situation and caught him. So, I don't know if that was something that he did intentionally or if it just kind of worked out that way. But and then moving on to Aleksandar Rakic, he likes to paw with his lead hand a lot. Like I was saying about Jan, he paws his lead hand out. He's trying to draw, he's feinting, trying to draw strikes out so he can counter. One thing I've noticed about Rakic is he seems to have really good eyes, as they say. Like, I think he's really good at reading what his opponent is doing and reacting. He's really good at seeing what's coming his way, I think, and he knows, how to counter and how to deal with what's coming his way. He can be somewhat flat-footed sometimes, and he doesn't always use a lot of movement. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe that's part of his style. I don't know. I feel like he's good at setting traps. Like I said, at seeing what his opponent is doing. I think he's good at setting traps and good at reacting to his opponent's movements. He also loves the head kick, and he's really good at setting it up. So overall, as far as an overall like dynamic for this fight here, Rakic is the significantly younger guy. I think Rakic is 30, and Blachowicz is 36 or 39. I can't remember. I should have this stuff in front of me, but I don't right at the moment. But, Blachowicz isn't necessarily an old fighter, but he's an older fighter. He's getting up there, and Rakic is certainly the younger, probably fresher fighter here with less fight miles on him and that kind of thing. So the basic breakdown, I think, of the way this fight plays out on the feet, Rakic is the younger, probably faster, more athletic, less fight miles on him. He's got a longer reach. He's got faster hands, I think. He's got, like I said, he's got great eyes and great reactions. And, one of the first things to go when you're getting older is the reaction time. They always say fighters keep their power. That's one of the last things to go. But one of the first things to go is you're simply not able to react as quickly as you used to be able to. I'm a 42. Well, I'll be 43 in 3 hours here. I'm a man in my 40s myself, and I don't have the reaction time that I used to. Jan's not in his 40s yet, but he's getting up there. So I think if the fight plays out as a kickboxing match at distance, I do think it favors Rakic, and I can understand why he's almost a 2-1 favorite here, because he's just going to be the quicker, more athletic guy with more reach. He's probably going to be landing more shots. He's probably, Jan's getting older, potentially getting a little bit slower, and like I said, Rakic has such great reaction times that Jan waits for those moments to come forward with his combos. I think Rakic is going to see those things coming. He's going to be quick enough to react to them. So I do think that the striking battle, if it plays out that way, favors Rakic. But what I'd like to see Jan do is turn this into a wrestling match. Or if not a full-on wrestling match, at least turn it into I want to see him clinch up. I want to see him push Rakic against the cage, make him wear his weight. I want to see him look to clinch. I want to see him look to dirty box, look for those takedowns if they're there. I think the way that Jan gives this fight away is if he agrees to make it a distance kickboxing match. Not that Jan, he's got that Polish power. Not that Jan can't win that fight. He can, but I don't think it favors him, and I don't think that's his best path to victory. And I don't know how much we can trust Jan to decide to make this a dirty, grimy, clinchy kind of fight, but I think that that's his best path to victory. I don't have a really strong lean either way on this fight because I really think it does matter a lot how Jan decides to approach it, and I don't feel confident that I know how Jan is going to try to approach it. So I can see why Rakic is favored, but I would definitely not bet Rakic at that minus 190, I think it was. I would definitely not bet or parlay Rakic at that nearly 2-1 because I do think this is potentially a winnable fight for Blachowicz if he comes in with the right game plan. If I was going to bet this fight, there are some props that I like here. You can get Jan Blachowicz by KO at plus 425. We know Blachowicz is capable of getting KOs. That's something that we do see from him. Hold on, I'm going to pull this up because I was going to type this in my notes, but I forgot to do it. Another sneaky prop that because we're probably going to get a pretty good number on this one because it's very unlikely. But another sneaky prop is Blachowicz by sub. Because if he does look to make this a wrestling match, you know, if he's able to tire Rakic out, if we see a lot of this fight playing out on the ground, is it possible that Blachowicz is able to get to his back and get a rear naked choke? Is it plus 750 possible? You know, yeah. So yeah, you can get, and that's on Bet Online. And like I said, they have worse numbers, and it might even be plus 900, plus 1,000 or something on some other books. I'm just guessing. I don't know, but yeah, Jan Blachowicz by sub is plus 750 on Bet Online. That could be one of those sneaky little props there that people aren't really thinking about because they just don't think the fight's going to play out that way. And they might be right. It might not, but I'm a person who likes to take sprinkles on fun little props like that. So just something to look at. But yeah, I think I probably do lean Rakic to win here, but not at, I don't lean him to win as much as the odds would suggest. So if I was going to bet here, I would probably bet Blachowicz, but I would look, the money line is maybe okay, but I would probably look toward some of those props inside the distance, KO or sub, something like that. But so far, it is going to be a stay away for me. Whew. We made it to the end of the breakdown, folks. Thanks for sticking with me. Let's go ahead and go over the bets that I have for this card, and then we'll call it a night. Okay, so I put 1.45 units on Caitlin Chookagian's money line at minus 145. Like I said, I made that one because I saw the way the line was moving, and I was trying to create an arbitrage opportunity with HEDGE. I do currently have that arbitrage opportunity, but it's very small, and I think I'm going to ride with Chookagian because I did get a pretty good line on her, and I do think she's probably going to win here. Next, I put 2.6 units on Michael Johnson at minus 130. Another, this is potentially a good live betting spot here too, because this is one of those fights where Alan Patrick is likely going to look good early, and then if he doesn't find a finish in round one, I think we'll see Johnson start to take over. But we might get an even better line on Michael Johnson, late in round one or between rounds 1 and 2. So if you do the live betting thing, that's going to be a good one to keep an eye on. But I do like Michael Johnson to win there. I put 1.55 units on Vina Jandiroba at minus 155. I'm not super confident. Yeah, I'm not super confident in that fight. I may actually put a little sprinkle on Jandiroba's sub prop as well. And I may even put a little, don't tell Kyle and Scott, because we're called Never Hedge Media. Don't tell them, but I may actually hedge on Angela Hill by decision a little bit because I'm not super confident in that bet, but hey, the bet's in there. So, and then I did put 2.1 units on Tatsuro Taira at minus 210. And I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but this was a little bit like the Chookagian bet. I made that bet pretty early. And if I remember correctly, when this fight was first booked, the line was wider, and I thought the line was going to get wider, and I was going to do an arbitrage situation on Carlos Candelario. The highest I saw him get to was plus 220, which technically is an R bout, but it's just a really small one, and I do think Taira is going to win, so I'm going to let that bet ride for now. And then I did take a half unit shot on Andre Petroski at plus 350 because I do think that there is value there. I do think the fight is closer than that plus 350 would suggest. If it gets late, yeah, Maximov is probably going to end up looking like a minus 400 favorite and that sort of thing. But in the first round, I think it's going to look pretty close. I might be wrong, but we'll see. And then I do have a couple parlays. I parlayed the over 2.5 in Araujo Lee and the over 2.5 in Chookagian Ribas at minus 212. Minus 112. I put 1.12 units on that. And then I parlayed Davy Grant's money line and Jake Hadley's money line for minus 104, and I put 1 unit on that. So that's what we're looking at right now. I may add to this. You can always find my bets at betmma.tips/Erik Block. That's ERIKBLOCK. My bets are always free there. Feel free to take a look. This is a great time for me to say, though, tail at your own risk. I always mean to give this disclaimer earlier in the video, but I forget. I am not a professional gambler. I am not any kind of gambling expert. I am just a longtime MMA fan and longtime casual MMA gambler who is trying to turn into a less casual, more knowledgeable, more serious MMA gambler. But if you want to tail consistent winners, there are plenty of them out there. Hit me up on Twitter. I can point you in the direction of people that have been winning consistently for years. I am not one of those people yet, so tail at your own risk. The point of my content, the way I see it, is I'm chronicling my journey to become a better MMA gambler, and you're coming along for the ride. So when I'm discussing these bets, I am not telling you where you should put your money. I'm just telling you where I'm putting mine. Just to talk about it, basically. So there's my disclaimer on that. But yeah, thanks so much for coming along for the ride here, folks. Thanks to the Never Hedge Media folks. Like I said, if you're watching me on Never Hedge, pop over to the Erik Bets Fights channel and make sure to subscribe to me there. Drop a like on the video. Drop a comment on the video. If you disagree with me, let me know. If you agree with me, let me know. I don't care what the comment is. It just helps to get the algorithms going. But yeah, if you'd like to find more of me and what I'm doing, you can find me on Twitter at Erik Bets Fights, also on Instagram at Erik_Bets_Fights. Of course, I'm Erik Bets Fights on YouTube. If you look at my Twitter, I have a link tree. Look at my Twitter bio. I have a link tree in there that has all my links. I also have an online store where I've got some shirts and mugs and fun stuff like that. With just kind of stuff that I made for MMA nerds that I think are kind of cool. Anyway, I'm the kind of person who, once I start blabbing, it's hard for me to stop. So I'm going to cut myself off here. We're going to go ahead and call it a video. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Make sure to check me out. The other spots that you can find me, I usually put this full card breakdown out usually on Wednesday. Thursday nights on the Erik Bets Fights channel, I have a show called Big Money Bets. I bring a guest on every week, and we talk about some big money props and parlays. This week, my guest is Dale Lippin from the Punch List MMA podcast. So tomorrow, Thursday, May 12th, my birthday, at 6 p.m. Pacific time, so that would be 10 p.m. Eastern time, Atlantic time, whatever they call it. We're going to be doing big money bets. And then you can also find me every Saturday on DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to that one too. Every Saturday that there's a UFC card anyway, 1 hour before the first prelim begins, we do a show called Best Bet. It's me, Brady from DFS by the Numbers, Uncle Wheezy, and Narco Cop. We go through the entire card, and we each give out our favorite bet for that card. So it's a great last stop if you want to get some last-minute degen action in literally right before the fights start, because we end the show right as the fights start. So it's a great last stop. Anyway, enough blabbing out of me. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Again, I am Erik with Erik Bets Fights, reminding you to play it smart, play it tight, and let's grow those bankrolls, everybody. Enjoy UFC Vegas 54. Take care, everybody.